This episode of Nuff Said is brought to you by Tweaked Audio. To get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com.
Are you sorry? Are you heartily sorry for all of your sins? Well, it doesn't matter. For now is the time of your just punishments. Welcome once again to Just Punishments, the Capes and Lunatics Southgate Media Guide to the Punisher on Netflix. Tonight's episode, Season 2, Episode 11, The Abyss. Amy rushes to protect Frank, who lies defenseless in a hospital. Pilgrim gets some crushing news. And Karen Page calls in a favor. I'm your host tonight, Charlie the Professor Esther, and with me, as always, is my skinny rich friend.
It's Mozz.
Hey, Mozz, welcome back. Good episode tonight. Our director tonight for The Abyss, Season 2, Episode 11, is one Mira Menon. Jerry Conway, John Romita Sr. have those Marvel created by credits, as well as Ross Andrew. Steve Lightfoot gets our credit by. This episode was written by Laura Jean Leal, Leal. Angela Lamanna, of course, is rocking it as our executive story editor. And you wouldn't be an executive story editor if there was not just a regular story editor right underneath you to boss around. Hardest working man in show business, Ken Christensen's story editor. Okay. Yeah, this was I liked this episode. I really did.
Yeah, it was a fun one.
Yeah, well, I like that for an episode with so little violence, it still made for a good Punisher episode because we really got to get a little bit of a procedural here, sort of we had Karen and Madani doing their little Dick Tracy bit and proving Frank's innocence. But we also see Frank dealing with what he feels he's done. And can we just give a shout out to guy who's bad at his job this week? The cop in charge of making sure no one goes into Dr. Castle.
But I don't think it was really his fault because the other guy was a cop too,
Well, yeah, I know, but it just seems like there's three people who come up. He's like, yeah, go ahead. It's like.
Oh, right.
Lawyer. I was like, oh, okay, lawyer. You go in, lawyer. And doesn't verify that she actually is his lawyer. He just basically says it. He's like, okay. And the same thing pretty much happens with Amy. And then of course you have the cop later. Who actually, I think the cop was actually relieving him. I think he was coming to say, yeah, I'm the new shift. And then
exactly.
Yeah. But
just there a little. It was this reminded me a lot of the sort of subplots of The Dark Knight, where the cop ends up being the one that wants to take the bounty out on Batman. Obviously he's Marvel's Batman, but I kind of do dig that they put him in his place, that he's just a human, and they leave his stories and his effect to its own little bubble. You know what I mean? Well, kind of makes more sense. Although he's not rich, so I guess.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. He steals enough drug dealer money that he has a little bit under the mattress. But one of the things I liked about, and this is jumping way ahead with that cop scene with the cop who tries to kill Castle. And for what it's worth, Castle's like, yeah, here's my arm, man, because he is he feels he's broken his code, like Krista said he would, and but what he says is he killed. Basically, he's coming after him to collect the $5 million. Yeah, but he also makes this point that because he killed the Kitchen Irish, one of those guys was his cousin. So his cousin was a mobster, was a part of the Kitchen Irish mob, and he's a cop, which makes you wonder how good of a cop he really was, especially since he's decided to go claim a bounty of $5 million on Frank Castle's head. Although, for what it's worth, people are missing out on this bounty because it's not a bounty for him dead. You gotta bring him in alive.
Right. That's why he had the injection, right?
Yes, but yeah. So that was neat. Now, jumping back to the start of this, of course, we do have Frank basically. We open up with Frank being wheeled into the hospital. Busted up bad, and I think Mahoney's there with him and says, he kills people, and then the nurse says, well, it looks like someone tried to return the favor. Um,
Mhm.
but I mean, there's a lot that's going on in this. But one of the things I thought was most fascinating. I mean, there's a couple things very fast. I mean, there's a lot that's going on here. One of the things is when Mahoney and Dina are talking, and Mahoney makes the point that no, they weren't trying to kill Castle. That all we found was rubber bullets and rock salt. You know that basically they weren't trying to shoot him. Um, they weren't trying to kill him as Frank was basically tearing the place up.
So the
Um,
rock salt being what they were shooting out of the shotguns, is that the
yeah,
implication?
that's it. So yeah, and rock salt. It's actually you can kill a person with rock salt. It's like shooting blanks. It's like you actually can cause someone horrible damage and actually kill someone.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's still a projectile, still coming at the same velocity out of a shotgun. So,
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
also still superheated and all that kind of stuff.
right.
But
I
but
mean,
it's like
it'll
softer
cause
than.
its damage and it'll dissolve inside your body. So that's kind of ingenious in a way.
Yeah, well, what it normally is that because it's so soft, it like
Mm.
breaks apart when it hits your skin, but it can actually, but if it's close enough, it'll have enough
Mm.
velocity to actually, really hurt you and could theoretically kill you.
Right.
Um, but what I like, and Mahoney's kind of lording it over Madani in this.
Right, but Mahoney knows, and he's sort of like sidestepping his own moral code in order to put tamp this thing down, tamp this violence down, I guess, but he's definitely skirting his own moral code to do it. Because he knows Frank didn't have anything to do with it. Like, if such a bad cop as Madani could figure it out, I'm sure he knows
Well,
what happened, which is why he's hiding the bodies.
yeah. Well, no. I mean, I honestly no. What he said was pretty straightforward, which was that Frank was they really because really he
No,
doesn't
but
know.
he's trying to propagate the false narrative that Frank killed those women when he knows he didn't.
Well, no, he doesn't know. So essentially, the only reason why Karen Page and Madani, when they do examine the bodies, realize that it couldn't have been Frank, is because it was at close range, and Frank thinks he shot them in the crossfire.
Okay, so
Um,
Mahoney doesn't have a conceptualization of where he shot them from. He has no clue of how that actually went down.
well, actually,
So
what
he's
he
missing
said
that bit of
was
it.
what he figured was that Russo was using them as human shields, and Frank shot through them. And when Madani says that's not Frank's house, like, well, what am I supposed to think of this? I've got these three dead bodies. I've got Frank, and for what it's worth, when they find Frank, he's he's sitting there. He's saying he says he's not denying it. He's not saying he
Right.
didn't kill them. So it's like, what's he supposed to take from that? Yeah. But what I think is neat in that is, and of course that's the thing. It's like it comes to this question about whether or not we're going to trust that Frank has a moral code, and that is essentially what the crux of this episode is. And when Billy calls Frank, calls Madani while she's at the hospital to talk to Frank to basically gloat.
Hmm.
You know, it is about him saying, I made you break your moral code. You're not better than me now.
Right.
And Krista is doing this to try and give him closure so that he can move on. But I think what you kind of get from this is the fact that I think he kind of says that, you want this thing and then, you have it and it's not what you thought it was. And I think Krista was hoping that realization is going to help him move on, but quite the opposite, I think. Yeah. honestly, the relationship between Krista and Billy in this is, you know, especially with her comfort in, you know, her understanding what Billy did,
And what she did. It seems like such a sharp pivoting turn in her character that they don't really take the time to gradually take the steps to get there. It's sort of a harsh sort of kind of thing to take in how
Well,
sharp that turn is.
well, I think she said, because what she says is she didn't do anything. She just told you how to get to Frank. He's the one that did it. So I guess in that sense, she absolves herself of it. But at the same time, it doesn't change how she sees Billy, and does not, doesn't, I guess if we're going to take anything from it, it is that she has this coldness in her, which, maybe when we look at her father's story, when she tells her father's story, um, which is such a messed up story,
Right.
because that's where we find out who KM is, and KM is her father, and apparently was a guy did 2 tours in Nam, came back with very severe PTSD, and after a fight with her mother, um, he basically takes her and says, if she can't have, if he can't have her, then no one can, and then he jumps out of the window with her, which is how she got all those scars. Which is, not for nothing, really dark, but
Yeah, but my favorite thing was her perspective on that situation. Lying there on the ground, from that little girl's perspective, she only thought like, "Hey, man, there was nobody that could help him.
yeah,
He had nobody that could help him. He could have just used a little bit of a hand, and he would have been all right." And so it was a wonderful bit of, giving us insight into where she comes from, or where her character comes from, like her moral code, or who she is, and then all of a sudden she's flipped on the other side of not being a person that's out to help people, but is comfortable hurting people. It's such a weird dichotomy that shouldn't exist, or coexist,
well, I
rather.
mean, I guess from her perspective, it's, she wants to help people at any cost, and that, saving, and I think she even says that about the hookers, is that she didn't know them, you know, these weren't real people to her, you know, he did what he did, but this is all to help him get to the next place so that he can actually get to a better life, which is not a good excuse, really, but it is the
No.
excuse she's using.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. It's not a good excuse, but it's the one she's using. Uh,
Right, I mean, I think it's also faulty writing too. It could have been better, not faulty, but like maybe a little lazy.
yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see it not being. I can see. You know what the problem is that it doesn't give her character enough agency, because it does seem that she's only existing as a reaction for Russo.
As a
Rather,
prop.
well, exactly, yeah. It is kind of diminutive when you break it down like that. But
Right.
I mean, you can make the argument that all the women in this show, are kind of being used in that way.
But
They
what's
have,
frustrating is they'll give you that beautiful moment about that story about her father and her surprising and unique perspective on that situation. It's such a wonderful character building thing, and then on the other end, they drop the ball a little bit, not
yeah,
a whole. But I'm gonna call out something we got to.
yeah. But again, I think that this is the crux of it. And you think about how Madani and Karen and Amy are all interacting with Frank,
Mm-hmm.
and how they are kind of beholden to him in this same need to fix someone, even though they know what he does is wrong.
Right.
Even Karen is looking at this as like, maybe I can save him. You
Right.
know,
But I think there's also sort of that debt owed for how many times he saved their lives.
mm-hmm.
especially Karen and Amy too. And one thing I'll say is Amy never ceases to be a badass when the situation calls for it. The other characters like Madani, she's struggling with, the decisions of what to do, what the right or wrong thing to do is. Karen also is like struggling with, should she let him go or should she do this or should she do that? Amy is completely clean sighted. She knows what the goal is and she's got to get it done. And I love that so much.
Yeah, and not for nothing. As far as Amy goes, she knows she needs Frank because she can't handle the guy with the black hat on her own. She can't handle Pilgrim, and she
she understands the reality of her situation.
Yeah, and not for nothing. And speaking of Pilgrim, we do have. Oh man, that is Sunday morning coming down for
Mr. Pilgrim?
Mr. Pilgrim waking up and you can see he is still pretty stoned when he finally gets around to calling his wife back. And Eliza Schultz, Annette O'Toole there, great performance by her. Picks is speaking with him and first off he's outright lying to him about his wife, which is, right there. And the thing is,
no, it's a tactical move. It's a strategic move.
No, but you know what? I have to tell you this. Pilgrim knows at that moment. He knows that she's dead, and he knows that she's not telling her, because when she does later in the episode come to him, say, "Oh yeah, she died last night," and he is very much in this view of, I know you're manipulating me.
Right.
I know. And she does, she basically holds him over a barrel too, because not for nothing, she has his kids. She has his boys.
I love that she's so conniving and so deeply entrenched into that corruption lifestyle with her family. That she came there with a plan, and I loved every argument that she gave. She already anticipated and had a rebuttal in her pocket. Oh, it was so beautifully done. And when everything was exhausted, she brought the kids in and played that hand perfectly too. I love that moment between them. That was such a great scene.
She is a really good, basically she is exactly who you would imagine would be married to the patriarch of the Schultz family. It's like they're both just two very happy peas in a pod in that.
Yeah, and I love that they had to go like the little extra mile and put that throbbing vein on the side of her face just to let her know how evil she is. Let us know how evil she is. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yes, that was quite good. I want to give a quick shout out here to Creepy Ed, who is Joseph D. Reitman here, who is in many ways, I think, much like the rat in Endgame, is like the unsung hero of the whole episode. But man, did you catch? I don't know if you caught it or not, but what it was he wanted from Karen?
I didn't exactly get it. I thought it was like either he'd been asking her out, or I know there was something he always asked her in previous iterations or seasons or something. But what was it?
If you watch carefully, in fact, it actually becomes an important plot point. As they're all evacuating. Creepy Ed is wearing her shoes.
That's where she left her shoes.
Yes, and that's why when Mahoney asked her, "Where are your shoes?" he said, "I donated them to a good cause."
Creepy Ed.
Creepy Ed, and I like the fact that it is super creepy. There's no argument there.
That's so great.
But it's not like there was. The level of violation that occurred in it is, it is reasonable.
It was still in the realm of fetishism, like acceptable, even mainstream fetishism.
Honestly, whether or not, what it is, it's like you don't feel that Karen feels particularly violated about it.
Right.
That it's something that she did, but it's actually... It's just that much worse because he asked for it, It's like,
right.
But it was that was a nice little touch on that, because honestly, I was waiting for it to be an issue like, well, we'll go out on a date, we'll have a nice dinner, we'll go to,
Yeah, and then
California.
when he like stood in the doorway to block Madani's exit, I was like, is this sort of like a Friends episode reference where all they had to do was kiss and they got their apartment back? And I was like, okay, but then he lets Madani go and he's like, okay, well maybe he wants to do something with Karen.
Well,
That's funny.
he is clear. Like I said, this is why he's creepy Ed. And like she says, you should work with the cops more. I said, yeah, and I've tried, but people don't like me. They call me creepy Ed. It's like maybe you should try to be a little less creepy Ed.
He is who he is, and he wants to be who he's to be.
Yeah, I don't know. God bless creepy Ed. So, but he is
Yeah.
like, as I say, he is the hero of it because he does give Madani and Karen Page access to the morgue, which they had no legal right to do. And again, like I said, what they realize is that it couldn't have been Frank because of the way it went down. That from their perspective, this was a cold-blooded shoot that Frank would have had no reason to do.
Right.
And of course, at that time, so after they've devised what they're going to do, after the cop has made his attempt on Frank Castle, um, you know, I'm trying to think who was the one who actually. Oh, it was actually Karen's the one who actually unlocks Frank, as Frank is telling everyone they have to get out of there. It's too dangerous. Yada,
Yeah.
yada, yada. And then we do see Pilgrim coming into the building at that time. I love the clown after after Karen starts pulling the alarms and everyone starts evacuating. And I just love that clown who's just sort of standing there looking around, like, what do
Right.
I was hired to be a clown today. Where do I go? Uh, I also liked him because he reminded me of Bill Murray's character in Quick Change. If you've ever
Never saw it.
never, oh, that is a classic Bill Murray film. I mean, it's
Nope.
one of those ones where it wasn't super popular, but it's one that I really enjoy. And it's a really it's a great heist film. So, and
Huh.
yeah, and it is a comedy, but it's not so bad. And it's got which one is it? Can't never remember if it was Randy Quaid or Dennis Quaid. The one from I think it's Randy Quaid. The one from who was in the Vacation films. Yeah, he's
I
one of
don't know.
he's his goofy partner in the crime, and it's
Gotcha.
it's a brilliant film. You should watch it. I'm sure it's out there somewhere for streaming
Oh, I'm sure.
for not too much, but yes. But when I saw him, he's like, oh wow, it's Bill Murray from Quick Change. So that was important to me. And what else? What else happened in this episode? I don't want to.
Again, once Pilgrim is coming into the hospital, they're getting Frank out, and once they get outside, Mahoney, who's maybe the best cop out of all of them in this moment, figures them out. And honestly, I think the plan that they had succeeds, even if they don't think that it did. Their goal was to get him out of there so he doesn't get murdered. And so they get him out, and they get him into the safest thing they can, a van with a cop in it, and the best cop maybe that is in that 4-block radius.
Yeah. Oh, and one more quick shout out for the guy who's really bad at his job is Officer Smith, who is Kareem Sevenon or Sevenyon. I don't know quite how you pronounce that, but yeah, he as they're wheeling out Officer O'Rourke in Frank's bed, it's like, yeah, you just saw him leave, He is not a details man. That is one thing you can say about our Officer Smith. He is not a details man.
So that's why this is the duty he got,
Well, yeah, but that's exactly why he shouldn't have gotten that duty, honestly.
That's also true.
It's like, I always make the joke that, the reason why this small group of, of rebels can always take the palace guards is because really the guys in the palace were probably the least skilled, because they were either the old guard who were now sort of, this was their retirement, or they were like some young whippersnapper guard that was just training, because all your good guards would be out in the field and doing all the things they had to do. So Yeah, so
Right.
he fits into
Doing
that.
all the things they wanted to do. Like, nobody wants pal's duty.
Well, no, actually, honestly, I think that's the best duty because because if you think about a pal's duty, that's the safest job.
Right, but yeah, if you're someone that wants safety, you're probably not the best guy for the job.
Well,
So
exactly. Well, like
that's
I said,
exactly the round wheel of irony here, I guess.
yeah. Well, but that's but it's the safest job because it's if you're in the palace, you're like well within the territory. You're not on the edges where there's a lot of fighting, and it's really the only problem you have is like that the rebels trying to take the castle. So, but yeah, so he fits that mold very well here, and he just
Yeah.
honestly he's gonna have a lot of paperwork after this. I mean, you can argue he never did anything really wrong. Everyone's paperwork was in order. Or they seemed to
Right.
be for as detailed as he checked it. But um, really, it was a guy who was not paying attention to what his job should have been.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving right along. Yeah. So they are, Madani's trying to walk him out, and again, this is one of these things where you gotta give Frank just for he has definitely got a Wolverine style healing factor because he is
Yeah.
currently limping out, but you know that by next episode he's going to be kicking butt again. It's
Also, because he can sort of afford to limp right now. He's sort of in danger, but not really. Like the proverbial poop hasn't hit the fan yet.
yeah.
So it's like he's taking a moment to himself. And the funny thing is, like, as soon as the camera first panned onto him after a night in the hospital, and you're like, oh man, he had like 30 nurses working on him for a couple of hours. Look at him. He's ready to kill at least a whole nother battalion by himself right now. He's
Yeah.
good to go. That was my first thought.
Yeah, well, and again, that I guess goes to the fact that they weren't really trying to kill him.
That's also true.
Yeah, so but for people not trying to kill him, they sure messed him up.
Right.
But
It's funny. His face is all cut up just like Russo right now.
yeah, well, of course, still has good bone structure and still, it's yeah, it's like it's
And
not,
he's got three pretty ladies fighting to save his life. So
exactly.
he's all right.
So, because you know what, it's not about how you look. It's about whether or not you're a jerk, and that's what you can say. It's not about women. I mean, everyone cares about how someone looks, but at the same time, for who you're going to dedicate your life to, it's not about how they look. It's about how they build to you. And it's Krista. It's just like I said, just the Harley Quinn to his Joker. And that is just their story. I really gotta wonder if the choice to have this relationship with Billy and Krista is sort of their way to tell the Harley Quinn Joker story, and maybe even make it maybe a little more palatable,
Right.
because the actual Harley Quinn Joker story is really unpalatable.
Right.
But anyway, but Mahoney does get the drop on Frank and Madani, and he cuffs him, he puts him in the ambulance, and then he drives him off. And that is where it ends for this episode. It's going to pick up real exciting next episode, but that's why I wanted to make sure where this episode ended, so don't give any spoilers for next episode yet, because there's a lot that happens next episode.
Okay.
Okay.
Can't wait.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Oh, anyway, I haven't even finished it yet because we are now on to the last two episodes, Mozz.
Wait.
Next one is the penultimate episode. Take a drink. And then we get to our final episode, just as Jessica Jones is about to drop.
Jessica Jones.
Yep, midnight tonight Eastern. That's when the first episode airs. So we're going to try and get those out to you, good listeners, as soon as possible. But in the meantime, Maz, final thoughts on tonight's episode?
Oh, I thought it was a really fun one. I was glad to see Karen Page in the mix again.
Yes. Although she has not told Matt Murdock where she was,
Yeah.
Which...
Well, he doesn't own her.
No, he doesn't. But she is using the fact that she is representation for... although it is, for what it's worth, it is Nelson Murdock and Page now, so...
That is true.
That is true. So she is the right as a partner to go take care of this stuff.
And she's got a good head on her shoulders. She knows the right thing to do at the right time too.
Yeah, she does. She does. Anyway, yeah, this was a great episode. And again, like you said, great to have Karen Page back. Great to have Matt Murdock get a shout out too. Let everybody know it's still a connected universe on Netflix. But anyway, in the meantime, if people would like to talk to you about any of this stuff, Mozz, how can people find you?
Or they can email me at mozzmanzor@gmail.com. That's MOZZMANZOOR.
And of course, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way the way our Mozz and Paz once did at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And of course, follow me on the Twitters as I live tweet Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and other things as I see fit at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the two E's in the middle. For quality. Give me the ping, Mozz. There we go. Yeah. We should have you do the for quality and the ping, I think. Yeah. I think it's just better when you say it.
Right on.
It also seems like it's an endorsement from someone other than the person trying to sell it themselves.
Oh, yeah. I like that aspect to it, too. Yeah, totally.
Very good.
Yeah, so I hit the for quality today, but I'll do the ping as well next time.
So there we go. We will do it great in the future because we're going to keep on doing this and many other shows well into the future, even after the Netflix stuff is done, because next comes Disney Plus.
And it's not bad for $6.99. Honestly, you shouldn't really have cable unless what do you watch on cable? So I always thought to myself, wouldn't it be nice if the cable let you buy channels that you wanted and not pay for the channels that you don't? There's 73 channels, but I only watch 10 of them, Yeah. So in that way, and I think what they're saying is what interesting things I heard, the Loki season is only going to be 6 episodes long. WandaVision's only going to be 6 episodes long. But what they're doing is they're putting full big budget movie budgets on these things. So they're going to be shorter, but they're going to be 6-hour movies, and they're going to progress the actual narrative along of the MCU. So it's going to be kind of fun. It's worth $7 a month.
Oh, without a doubt it is. And for what it's worth, I'm looking forward to it. And and as far as I'll be honest with you, I spend very little time on regular TV except to watch MSNBC and then the broadcast stuff that my antenna isn't picking up very well. So, and big fan of Tubi. Got Lilith hooked on Tubi, so I'm very proud of that. Okay. In the meantime, dear penitents, know today your sins have been absolved, and you may now go in peace and sin no more. But when you do, return here for your just punishments. Good night.